Hello everyone, welcome to the Ionic YouTube channel. My name is Logan Braid. I'm developer advocate at OutSystems for the Ionic team. If you see in our social channels, you know that there's a lot of changes that have been going on in the Apple ecosystem. And we figured it would be best to try to explain them. So I have brought in our resident expert, Dallas, to talk about some of the challenges that are happening in the Apple ecosystem and kind of give us a heads up of what's going on and how to potentially mitigate anything that's going on with your apps. How's it going, Dallas?
It is going great. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. It's great.
Yeah, hey, thanks for joining me. So if you can dive in, what exactly is happening with these Apple changes?
Yeah, so a lot of these changes that Apple has brought about, they announced a couple of months ago. And the point of these changes is just really to ensure that the code that's actually arriving on end users' devices is the code that's supposed to be there. There's just really two main problems that Apple is really targeting here. The first one is kind of a supply chain vector. We hear about this a lot in code where you're consuming third-party libraries. You need a way to ensure that these third-party libraries are actually what they say they are and who they say they are. Capacitor was on the list of these affected applications that are affected libraries that need to provide a signature that validates that we are who we say we are when you're actually using the Capacitor library. And that really is the point here. It's so that application developers, when they consume libraries, know that they are using the actual library that they're supposed to be using, that it's not been tampered with, and that it is safe and valid to use. The other side of this is the privacy manifest. I think this has kind of been the one that's been more talked about. And there's a whole list of APIs that Apple has come out with that they said, we're going to lump all of these into this group of more privacy-focused APIs, and you can use these. You don't need special entitlements or permissions to use these, unlike certain things. However, if you do use these, you have to explain why are you using this. And so that's kind of the other half of these changes that Apple is making.
Gotcha. So why did Apple decide to change this and add the privacy manifest? Like what prompted this?
Yeah, so they actually talk about this pretty well in their documentation. They have it pulled up here. If you want to pull that up, perfect. So they have this article that's talking about this required reason API, right? This is specifically for those privacy-aligned APIs. And they call out pretty clearly here that these APIs specifically have the potential of being misused across devices, and they can be used to fingerprint devices. So a lot of people, when they like to track users, and these can be used to track people across different applications, across sessions. Ideally, if someone installs your app, they uninstall it, and they come back later, there really shouldn't be a good way to know that that's the same person, in my opinion. And Apple seems to agree on this, right? They don't want you to be able to fingerprint a device to know and track who this person is across, multiple applications, and across the lifetime of the device. And so that's really what they're looking out for here with these required reason APIs, is just to really crack down on that fingerprinting behavior and ensure that these more privacy sensitive APIs are being used specifically for the reason they're intended to be used.
Gotcha. So a lot of it just came down to security and making sure that users who have Apple devices, they're being secured, essentially. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yep. That's really what these are for, right? That these APIs, if you're using them, and especially as an end user, that you know these are being used, and in theory, why they're being used.
Gotcha. Okay. So now, as far as these changes go, what exactly is changing, and what is changing with the way that Capacitor applications are built?
Yeah. So the signing part, the third-party framework signing part, is pretty transparent. For the most part, there's not really a need for application developers to do anything about that. That really comes down to our ability to effectively sign the SDK, right? Once that's done, it's just taken care of. Everything else is seamless. For the privacy APIs, however, it's a little bit different because you as the application developer have to specify why are you using this API. right? And so that's really the part that you have to do. And it's a manifest file that you put together. Like, we're all very familiar with the info plist files that we've had to make for iOS devices for a long time, right? I'm using the camera. Here's the reason why I'm using the camera, right? This really is no different from that. It's just a slightly different format and one additional manifest file that we have to maintain.
Gotcha. And basically, it's just using it for libraries versus then like the physical hardware.
Yep.
In this case.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Exactly that.
Okay. So now you talked about two different changes that were happening in regards to like the privacy manifest file, and then also the like marking changes for third-party SDKs. How do I know what code to use to make my projects work?
Yeah. So there's a couple of different steps, and we can take a look at some examples of what you should look for. So firstly, in the Capacitor documentation, if you're just in the main doc section under iOS, we have this section specifically about privacy manifest, what it means and what you need to worry about with that. So you'll see kind of here in bold, right? This is important starting May 1st, which is probably already in the past by the time this is out, or it's the day of. This is important, right? Because these manifests are required at this point, right? So if you are submitting a new or an updated application to the App Store, you must have this privacy manifest in your application. And then in terms of creating them, there's a couple of different ways. There's the VS Code extension, which we'll show, and I'll show that in just a second here, which I think is the easiest way to go about this. If you use, VS Code for your capacitor development, highly recommend installing this into VS Code, and it can really manage a lot of things, especially like these privacy manifests. If we look down below, if you don't, maybe you're using a different editor, maybe you're using, JetBrains or, any of the other popular editors, there's also manual steps so you can understand how to do this. And most of this is you just open up Xcode. Again, the instructions are here as to what you need to do and where to go. This is just a file that you generate and then fill out, and it just looks very similar. You see, this is also a plist file. It's not the info plist, but it is a plist file, and it looks incredibly similar to the info plist, where you're specifying, what are the API types that we are accessing, and then specifically, like you asked about, declaring a code. So Apple gives you a handful of options that you need to choose from when you're using these APIs. So if we look back at the documentation here, and we scroll down, so we can see, close this back up here. So for example, the disk space APIs, right, that talk about how much disk space is available on our given device. There's a handful of these APIs. Most of these are not going to look familiar, right? Capacitor abstracts all of these away so that you never actually see these specific APIs. But then Apple says, here are the codes you can use if you want to, to explain, like, why are you using these? And you have to declare which of the various codes they choose you're using. So if we look at something like the Capacitor device plugin, right? It's using the device API. This plugin specifically, and a couple others, use some of these privacy restricted APIs. And for those ones that do, we've added this privacy manifest requirements section to the plugin documentation. So you can come over here and look at this, and it will show you an example of the privacy info. It shows you exactly which keys are being accessed. And then we also provide a recommended reason to choose. So if you don't know why this is being used. So like in this case, the device API accesses the disk space. It has an API method so that you can retrieve that information. If you're not using it through this plugin, but you have this plugin installed, you still have to declare the reason because that code exists in your project, even if you're not using it. That's something we want to look into in the future, but at least for now, you still have to declare a code even if you're not using that specific API. And so in that case, yeah.
So essentially, like, Apple will recognize that you're using it even if you're not actively using it in the project. If the libraries are installed, it's gonna pick it up.
Yeah. See, the best way to think about it is that Apple does static code analysis, right? Mm-hmm. They basically look at that bundle you submit and just scan it, and they're looking for those key phrases, right? So if we look back at their docs, they're looking for this method in your code anywhere, right? And so because the device plugin has that method inside of its own source code. That method exists inside of your final app bundle, whether you're using it or not. And so you will get flagged if you don't provide a privacy manifest for that. So in that case, we give a recommendation of what you could use if you don't know what to use, because again, maybe you're not using it or you just don't know. This would be a good safe bet. I would say if you are using any of these APIs, you definitely should go in and actually read through the different codes and decide which one you want to use. Whichever one is most appropriate for your application, so that you are, providing the proper information. But this is a good fallback here if you need that.
Oh, good. Okay. So now, as far as like actually implementing these changes, is there any way you could show us like exactly how we would go about it in our own projects?
Absolutely. So I have just spun up a new test project here. Brand new application, just from the ground up. There's nothing been done to this other than I swapped out the npm install for pnpm install, because
that's just how you roll.
That's how I roll. So I've also installed the Android and iOS projects on here. And so what you'll see is if we were to just run this as is, I also have the VS Code extension. By default, out of the box, Capacitor doesn't require any privacy manifests. Capacitor 6 does not require any privacy manifest changes. If you are on an older version of Capacitor, 4 or 5, Capacitor Core did use the user preferences API, which is one of those flagged privacy manifests. So out of the box, a Capacitor 4 or 5 application would need to create a privacy manifest, but because we're on Capacitor 6, we removed that so that a blank Capacitor application needs nothing special.
Okay.
So if we open this VS Code extension here for our project, we can see there's no recommendations being made. There's normally like a yellow section about recommendations. If we come in and we add, so we'll add this Capacitor device plugin. So I go ahead and install it. I'm not going to do anything else other than install it and refresh the extension. So it's just going to go back and look through everything again. And you'll see that we have this new recommendation for adding a privacy manifest. And hovering over, we get this nice little tooltip. All right. This is required. And this is now required because we've added the device API. So this VS Code extension has a whole list of plugins that are known to require this privacy manifest, so that you can pretty reliably rely on this extension to be able to identify when you need this. So if we click on this, we get this little prompt that says, hey, you need this because you're using particular plugins. Do you want to create one? You say, yes, we do. So it's going to go ahead and add that to our project. And then we can click on this again and we can see we're missing certain privacy manifest categories. So it says, oh, you're using the disk space API. So you need to declare a category for that. And it will list out, these are all of the different categories that you can choose from that Apple gives you, right? So we looked at that list on the doc site. These are all of the options that you can pick for the disk space. So you can click on the docs here. This will open up those Apple privacy docs that we looked at, right? I'm going to cancel that because we don't need to look at it now. And my prompt has gone away. Oh, no.
Uh-oh.
That's okay. It goes away. I'm sure I can just refresh this. There it is. So now we can come back and we can actually pick one. So if we wanted to, right, we're like, I don't know what to pick. I just installed this plugin. Maybe I'll pop back over here and be like, oh, the recommended reason is 85F4.1. We come back over. That's the first one in this list. So we'll go ahead and click that, and we're good to go.
Oh, so does it do it automatically for you? You don't even have to
Yes.
that's amazing.
You don't have to type anything. So we can look at this, and if we look at our source control and we find, I should have committed before I did this, but we can see this is the file that it's created here. Go ahead and close that.
Well, I think the cool part about this is that like you get to be as involved as you want to be with it. Like if you want to create this on your own and your capacitor projects, you totally can. Or if you need, the guidance and the recommendations from the Visual Studio plugin, it's there for you too. And you can use that and not even have to worry about any of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll just commit all of these changes. So let's we can just do this again really quickly because it's that pretty straightforward and simple. So we come back in here. We're going to add the file system plugin this time, just because I know that's another one that uses the flagged APIs. A lot of the file system APIs are flagged now. So if we go ahead and add this, we're going to jump back to our Ionic extension. Go ahead and refresh. You can see it's now detected that we're missing something again because we have a new one. This time it's the file timestamp, and we can look at the different codes. So let's jump back over here. Let's go to the file system plugin, and the recommendation here is this C617. So we'll go ahead and grab that, C617. Again, it's the first one in the list. That's the recommended one we suggest. Go ahead and click on that, and we can see that it just went ahead and added this straight into that manifest file for us, so that it's all managed. We don't have to worry about it. Obviously, if we want to, we can come in and change this to a different value if we need to change that later, but super easy to manage. Highly recommend using the VS Code extension for this, because again, it's aware of a lot of plugins, not only the official Capacitor ones, but also a lot of the community plugins that require reasons for using their APIs. I will throw this out as well. If you do come across other plugins and you submit to the App Store and they get flagged because they have a required reason API and the VS Code extension does not account for it, you can always come in. There's a little support tab down here, and you click to provide feedback. And this opened in a different window, so it actually would open up here, and we get this. It takes you right to this VS Code extension repository. There's no code in here. The actual code for the VS Code extension is kept private, but you can submit issues on here, and the developer who maintains this extension watches all of these issues, so you can report specific plugins not getting flagged properly.
Oh, that's awesome. So even if it's not working, you have somewhere that you can report it to, and it will get updated.
Yep.
That's awesome. So now, if developers are going through this and they have any like questions or anything about like this type of these types of privacy changes, where can they go to get answers on it?
Yeah, so I definitely recommend starting at the documentation, right? Mm-hmm. So there's this whole page on here about the privacy manifest, you know, what's important about it, what you need to know, and how to meet all of the requirements for this. So I would definitely start here. If you're still having questions after that, I would recommend probably the community Discord. You can ask questions in there, and there's a lot of community people in there who do understand this and can help you ensure that you have all of the right data points and everything that you need inside of your privacy manifest.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for going over this with us, Dallas. We really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. And I know how much some of these changes at Apple can cause a little bit of heartache and headache, but we're glad to see that there's answers and that there's a way to overcome it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's been kind of a little bit of a scramble. It was a very short timeline for a lot of people, but I really think we've got all of the steps in place so that, you know, anyone building on Capacitor has all of the tools they need to continue to be successful and to get everything implemented exactly how it's supposed to be. So I hope it's been helpful for everyone, and that, you know, you keep building great applications.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Dallas.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for watching. My name is Logan Braid. Again, I'm developer advocate at OutSystems for the Ionic team. And I just want to thank Dallas for joining us today, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you so much.